For the past couple seasons, the NBA playoffs have been rather dry and predictable. It's now the beginning of the 2024 playoffs, and as of the making of this video, of the 8 series going on, 5 of them are already up 2-0, and it's looking like most of these series are more predictable than we thought. But believe it or not, it actually wasn't always like this. Have you ever asked yourself what was the most competitive playoffs in NBA history? The playoffs is where the best of the best play each other for a best of 7 series, and sometimes these can serve as some of the most entertaining and exciting games you could ever watch. But on the other hand, sometimes it can be just one team beating up on every other team in the conference, which isn't very exciting to watch. Well, there have been some crazy playoffs through the years that played out to have some unforgettable moments, like Kobe Bryant buzzer beaters, 3-1 lead comebacks, and some of the best underdog stories. But today, we're going to not so much just look at the moments, but the series as a whole, to find out what was the most competitive playoffs of all time. To measure the level of competitiveness, first we're going to come up with an equation by basically measuring the total games played divided by the total possible games played. For example, the 2023 playoffs had 105 possible games, but had a total of 85 actual games played, bringing the competitive percentage to 80%. This way, we can still come up with a fair analysis since earlier playoff formats had lesser rounds and series were decided in 5 games instead of the 7-game format we know today. And instead of going through every single playoffs ever, I'm going to go with 5 different years I chose to make this video. Those being the 1976 playoffs, 1994, 2009, 2014, and 2016. But something to know before beginning, in 1984, the playoffs were expanded to 16 teams, and in 2003, all playoff series were extended to 7 games, with previously the first round was only going to 5 games. Now with all that being said, let's get started. For the 1976 playoffs, instead of the first round being a best of 7 series like we know today, back then, the first round was only a best of 3 series, with 3 teams in each conference getting byes in the first round. The first round back then was more like the play-in tournament, with the later rounds being a best of 7 series. So there were 55 possible games to be played. The first round series was actually very competitive because both conferences actually went to 3 games, bringing that first round total to 6 out of 6 possible games played. The second round is where teams would then start to play best of 7 series, with 3 of those series going to 6 games and 1 of them going to 7 games. So therefore, in the second round, out of the 28 possible games played, they played 25 out of those games. The conference finals would also be competitive, as in the Eastern Conference Finals, the Celtics and the Cavs series went to 6 games, while in the Western Conference Finals, the Warriors and Suns would push the series to 7 games, with the 3-seeded Suns beating out the 1st-seeded Warriors, bringing the conference finals to a total of 13 out of 14 total games played. In the finals, the Suns and Celtics would push their series to 6 games, with the Celtics beating the Suns to win the championship. The 1976 playoffs would also serve as the most recent playoffs that didn't include a sweep. Now with all these games together, this would give the 1976 playoffs a competitive percentage of 50 out of 55 games, or 91% of games played. Around the time of the 1994 playoffs, the first round format was now changed from 3 games to 5 games, and the 4-team first round format was now implemented. So there would now be 89 total possible games played. The first round for the 94 playoffs wasn't as competitive, if not competitive at all, with only 31 out of the 40 possible games being played. But it was the second round where everything would turn up, because 3 out of the 4 series would go on to be 7-game series, with 1 of them going on to be 6 games. Although the Western Conference Finals only saw the Jazz and Rockets going to 5 games, the Eastern Conference Finals was where all the action took place, because this series saw the Knicks and Pacers going all the way to 7 games, which showed both conferences playing 12 out of the possible 14 games. In the finals, it will be the Rockets and the Knicks, which will go on to be another 7-game series, which was won by the Rockets. Now with 77 total games played to the 89 possible games, we get a competitive percentage of 77 out of 89, or 86.5%. The 1994 playoffs actually holds the record for the most Game 7s being played, with 5. The most notable moment in these playoffs would be when the Nuggets beat the Supersonics in the first round, marking them the first 8 seed to beat a 1 seed. The Knicks would also play a record 25 playoff games, which was one short of the maximum. By the time the 2009 playoffs had rolled around, the best-of-7 series format we know today for every round was now implemented, and it was one to remember, mostly from the Eastern Conference, because there were 2 7-game series and 1 6-game series in the first round, with also LeBron and the Cavs sweeping the Pistons. The reason this first round is often remembered though is for the Bulls and Celtics series, where they had set an NBA playoff record for the most overtime games with 4, and most overtime periods with 7 being played. In the first round, both conferences came together to play 45 out of 56 possible games. The second round for both conferences had at least one series go to 7 games, with those being Magic versus Celtics and Lakers versus the Rockets, coming together to win 23 out of the 28 games. The third round of the 2009 playoffs was full of superstars, with Kobe and Melo in the West and LeBron and Dwight in the East. Kobe and Melo series was full of non-stop scoring from both ends, with Melo averaging 27.5 points and Kobe averaging 34 points. Before the finals had even begun, major sports networks like ESPN had pushed the LeBron versus Kobe finals, which everyone wanted and expected. To finally see a LeBron and Kobe matchup in the finals was what every fan dreamed of. But unfortunately, that would never happen, because Dwight and the Magic would break the hearts of everyone following that playoffs by beating the Cavs in 6 games. Both series would end up going to 6 games, giving the conference finals 12 out of the 14 games played. But although the finals ended in just 5 games, with the Lakers coming on top, it was still kind of competitive since 3 out of the 5 games came within 10 points. This would then give the 2009 playoffs a competitive percentage of 86 out of 105 games, or 81%. The 2014 playoffs may have been the most competitive first round in NBA history, because 5 out of the 8 series that were played went to 7 games, with the only sweep coming by the Heat and Bobcats, meaning out of 56 possible games, 50 out of those games were played out. The first round included an NBA record 24 road wins, plus a record 8 overtime games. 3 Game 7s were played on the same day and 2 were played on the next day. The second round wasn't really that much exciting, but there were still 2 Game 6s that were played, with 2 other Game 5s, making the second round add up to 22 out of 28 possible games. Now, the conference finals had great matchups between teams like the Spurs versus the Thunder and Heat versus the Pacers that had some very memorable moments, like Lance Stevenson blowing in LeBron's ear, multiple clutch baskets by Paul George and LeBron, and Tim Duncan scoring 7 straight points in overtime against a prime Ibaka. Both series went on to go to 6 games, with the Spurs and Heat facing off in the finals. But although the finals rematch against the Heat and Spurs wasn't what everyone expected, with the Spurs dominating the Heat in 5 games, it was still a good series to watch, if you're a Spurs fan at least. So now, adding up all the numbers for the 2014 playoffs, we would get a competitive percentage of 89 out of 105, or 84.8%. The 2016 regular season had some crazy, unforgettable moments, but the playoffs served us with some even better moments. The first round of this playoff saw 2 Game 7s and 2 Game 6s being played, with not much really happening out of those series, with only 45 out of 56 possible games played. The second round served a little more entertainment, with a Game 7 and Game 6 between the Heat versus Raptors and Thunder versus the Spurs. The Warriors and Cavs made quick work of their opponents, with their series only going to Game 4 and a Game 5, playing 22 out of 28 possible games. The Western Conference Finals is where everything started to get juicy, because we had a Game 7 between the Thunder and the Warriors and a Game 6 between the Cavs and the Raptors. Although the Cavs and Raptors would go to 6 games, this series was never really competitive, and from the beginning, it was clear who the winner was going to be. But for the Thunder and Warriors, that was the total opposite. Although the 73-9 Warriors were favorites to win this series, this was probably the farthest this team had been pushed at this point. The Warriors would go down 3-1 to the Thunder, and all hope seemed lost for the Warriors going into OKC for Game 6. But lo and behold, unknownly to everyone, it would be the birth of Game 6 Clay that would save the Warriors' hopes. Clay would drop 41 points this game, hitting 11 threes, and Curry pitched in, dropping 31 points also, with the Splash Brothers combining for 71 points. Now on to maybe the greatest finals of all time, Warriors versus Cavs. The first 4 games really went as expected, with the Warriors blowing up the Cavs in Game 1 and 2 at home, then the Cavs winning Game 3 at home. Game 4 would then go to the Warriors, which made them go up 3-1 in the series. And at this point, everyone thought it was over, and the Warriors had already won the championship. But the one thing you should never do is count out LeBron James. Because in Game 5, LeBron and Kyrie would put on with the best duo finals performance in NBA history, scoring 40 points apiece. The Cavs will continue this run, beating the Warriors again in Game 6, but it wouldn't be until Game 7 where every eye in the world was watching. Game 7 registered the network's highest rated and most watched NBA game with 31 million viewers, and it was a show to behold. The game would go back and forth basically the whole game, but it wasn't until the last minutes where everything went crazy. Both teams would miss shot after shot, but the tides would finally turn when Iggy would go on for a fast break layup and would end up getting blocked from behind by LeBron, making the greatest defensive stop in NBA Finals history. Then a couple of plays later, Kyrie would hit the shot of shots over Curry to put the Cavs up by 3. And by this point, the game was already decided. LeBron and the Cavs had become the first team to overcome a 3-1 deficit in the finals. After this 7-game series, this would put the 2016 playoffs competitive percentage at 85 out of 105 games, or 81.9%. Now for the final analysis. By the competitive percentage metric, we can put every playoff side by side to see which one was the most competitive by our metric. In 1976, it was 91%. 1994 was 86.5%. 2009 was 81%. 2014 was 84.8%. And 2016 was 81.9%. So by these metrics, the 1976 playoffs were technically the most competitive playoffs in NBA history. This makes sense since every team won at least 33% of the games in each series, making virtually every contest tightly competitive. But me personally, I'd pick either the 1994 or the 2014 playoffs as the most competitive, because in 1994, the final 3 rounds included 46 played games out of a possible 49 games, which was 93.9%. And in 2014, the first round literally broke records for how competitive it was. While we know these playoffs to be very competitive, recently, the playoffs have been more predictable than ever before, making the playoffs really unwatchable. But what many people don't know is that the reason for this wasn't because teams just got better, but was actually because of one simple play that made one team pretty much unstoppable, turning them into a dynasty. Click here to find out who that was.